Yes, generational curses, bloodline curses, demonic covenants in the bloodline are definitely very real things that can be passed down to you through your bloodline, to your children, to your great-grandchildren, all the way down. But the blood speaks a better word. You are only vulnerable to these bloodline curses if you are not under the blood of Christ, if you do not know Jesus, if you have not been born again. What happens when we get born again is we are born into a new spiritual bloodline. Jesus' blood comes into our bloodline and cleanses out all of those curses and things. So I don't believe that Christians are vulnerable to generational curses at all, no matter how bad the bloodline is. Just to kind of explain, I will share a little bit about my past. Most of the addictions and the generational curses come from my father's line, and as far back as I know, they've all been alcoholics, and my grandma and both my own father passed away from lung cancer because they smoked cigarettes. Heavy abuse on that side of the family. My dad left home when he was like a teenager, I think 14 or 15, and he had a brother that also left home around the same time. My dad struggled with alcoholism and smoking, of course. He was also kind of a criminal by nature. It was this way of functioning. He wound up in prison for about 8 years for murder, and he was actually released early after 8 years. That's why me and my sister are 8 years apart. But he was released early after 8 years because they found masses in his lungs. And they didn't tell him anything, but I think they knew that the cancer, his lung cancer, had already progressed enough and he wasn't going to live very long. So he came home, and my mom got pregnant and had me. And when I was about 3 months old, my dad passed away from lung cancer. I was also born very prematurely at 27 weeks. I weighed 1 pound, 12 ounces. I had like several blood transfusions. I have IV scars on both of my hands. You can see I have very shallow veins to this day because of all of that. I don't know if you can see that. I have very, very shallow veins as a result of all of that. During this time, this period of my dad being sick and me being in the hospital, he became a changed man. And the night before he passed, I'm just throwing this in there that nobody's too far from God and too far from the gospel to be changed, even though he kind of lived his whole life as like a serial criminal. The night before he died, my mom was laying in bed, and he thought she was asleep, but she wasn't. And she said she had her back turned to him, and he cried out to God and told God that all he wanted to do was spend time with his family and be with his family. So a couple of things started showing when I was very young, like I'm talking 3 years old young. My mom used to tell me stories of this, where I had natural proclivities for deception and manipulation. I know I laugh about it now. Thank God for the gospel, right? Because I would have turned out to be a very, very, very different person without him. But she said ever since the second I talked at 3 years old, like I was just that way. And some of my family members used to say, oh, you're just like your dad. You're just like your father. So thankful I did not ever struggle with alcoholism. I never really liked alcohol too much. I did struggle with smoking cigarettes so before I was 18, I would get cigarettes from like my best friend. Her mom smoked, so we had easy access to cigarettes. But when I hit 18, I could buy cigarettes. So I started smoking, and I smoked from about 18 to about 21. And during this time, it was a very like ritualistic thing for me. I know that sounds kind of odd, but like the whole act of packing cigarettes and smoking them and blowing the smoke and all of those things just like had such a big hold on me. And there were times when I thought about like my dad and my grandma. They had died of lung cancer. Like, oh God, is that going to affect me too? Because I'm now smoking. And again, the natural deceit thing I mentioned, I believe is what really, along with a lot of other things in my life, really set me down the road for witchcraft when I engaged in witchcraft when I was 15. And I dove headfirst into it. It was the first time in my life where I felt any kind of power or control in my life. When I came to Christ, I was able to leave cigarettes like cold turkey. I never had any sort of issues with it. It was so awesome and so strange at the same time. But I will say to this day, it's been I'm 33 now. I got saved at 21. So it's been years. Still to this day, if I'm like walking down the street or I'm passing somewhere and I smell the smell of cigarette smoke, I instantly remember old memories of the ritualistic feeling that cigarettes used to give me. And it's not a temptation or anything. Like, I would never go out and buy a pack of cigarettes and smoke them. But it's just something that I noticed. But thank God for the blood. Jesus has cleansed me from all sin and all generational curses in my life, because you are not vulnerable to generational curses. You are not vulnerable to the sins of the fathers, because Jesus' blood speaks a better word and he cleanses your bloodline. You were born into a new bloodline.